The radio operator on night duty at the Deep Space Listening Array in Nevada nearly fell out of his chair when the signal came through. At first, he thought it was a glitch in the system. The pattern was too regular, too deliberate to be cosmic background noise. After running 3 verification protocols, he picked up the red phone. "Sir, I think you need to see this," he said, his voice shaking. 12 hours later, Captain John Miller stood on the bridge of the U.S. Defiant, Earth's most advanced spaceship. His crew moved with practiced efficiency around him as they prepared for emergency departure. The mission brief had been simple yet terrifying. An alien distress signal, the first confirmed contact with non-human intelligence, and they were the closest response vessel. "Final systems check complete, Captain," said Lieutenant Susan Carter from her station. Her fingers danced across the control panel with confident precision. "All systems green." John nodded. "Take us out, Lieutenant. Best possible speed to the coordinates." The massive engines of the Defiant hummed to life, pushing the ship beyond Earth's orbit and toward the asteroid belt where the signal originated. The journey took 3 days, during which the crew speculated about what they might find. None of their theories prepared them for reality. "Captain, I have visual," called out Navigation Officer Pete Jackson. "Putting it on the main screen now." The bridge fell silent. Floating among the asteroids was a ship unlike anything they'd ever seen. Its hull was made of what looked like crystalline material that shimmered with an inner light. But large sections were missing, as if something had taken bites out of the vessel. "Life signs?" John asked, breaking the silence. "Faint readings, sir," Susan replied. "But they're unlike anything in our database." John made his decision quickly. Prep a boarding team. Full hazard protocols. An hour later, John led a team of 6 through the alien ship's airlock. The interior was bathed in a soft blue light that seemed to come from the walls themselves. The air was breathable, though it carried a strange metallic taste. "This technology is centuries beyond ours," whispered Dr. Gray Howard, the team's science officer, as he scanned a control panel. They found the survivors in what appeared to be the command center. 3 alien beings, humanoid but with translucent skin that revealed complex circulatory systems beneath. 2 were already dead. The third lay against a console, breathing in shallow gasps. When it saw the humans, its large, multifaceted eyes widened. It spoke, and to everyone's surprise, a device on its wrist translated into broken English. "You came too late for us, but perhaps not for you." John knelt beside the dying alien. "We received your distress call. What happened to your ship?" "The Void Eaters," the alien replied, its voice growing weaker. "They found us, as they find all advanced life. They consume everything." Susan stepped forward. "Who are these Void Eaters?" The alien's eyes focused on her with sudden intensity. "You haven't encountered them. Your species might still have time." With trembling hands, the alien removed a small device from its wrist and offered it to Susan. The object was about the size of a pocket watch, but seemed to shift and change even as she looked at it. "Take this. When they come, and they will come, you'll need it." John looked concerned. "What is it? How does it work?" The alien's breathing became more labored. "It was meant to control them. But our biology, incompatible. Your species, unique biology may be your salvation." The alien's eyes began to dim. They emerge from the spaces between reality. They hunger for energy. "Civilizations, we are not the first to fall, nor will we be the last." With its final breath, the alien gripped Susan's hand. "They are coming for Earth now. Prepare, if you can." Then it was gone, leaving the humans standing in silent horror among the ruins of a civilization far more advanced than their own. And in Susan's hand, a device that seemed to pulse with possibilities they couldn't yet understand. "Captain," she said quietly, "we need to get back to Earth." Now, 6 months after the encounter with the alien ship, Earth's scientists noticed something strange. Unusual readings appeared on sensors throughout the solar system. Small tears in the fabric of space, barely visible at first, began to form near Jupiter's moons. Dr. Alan Wright hadn't slept in 3 days. The physicist sat in his lab at the Global Science Center, surrounded by screens showing data from these anomalies. His eyes were red-rimmed, his coffee long cold. "It doesn't make sense," he muttered to himself. "These readings violate every law of physics we know." His assistant, Ben Kelly, entered with a fresh pot of coffee. "Any progress, sir?" Alan shook his head. "These aren't natural phenomena. They're like tears in space-time itself." On the main screen, a live feed showed a new anomaly forming near the moon base. It started as a pinprick of darkness, then expanded into a swirling vortex about 50 meters wide. "What on earth is that?" Ben whispered. The answer came moments later. Something emerged from the vortex. It defied description. Part energy, part solid matter, constantly shifting between states. It moved with purpose toward the moon base, leaving destruction in its wake. "Get me a direct line to Moon Base Alpha now," Alan shouted. Security Chief Mary Dawson was finishing her rounds when the alarms blared. She rushed to the control room, where screens showed the approaching entity. "What are we looking at?" she demanded. "Unknown, Chief," replied her second-in-command. "It's giving off energy readings off the charts." Mary grabbed her gear. "Initiate evacuation protocol. Get everyone to the emergency shuttles." She led a team to the outer section to buy time for the evacuation. Their weapons, the most advanced humanity had developed, fired at the entity. The beams passed through it without effect. When missiles hit, the creature seemed to absorb the explosions, growing slightly larger. "Fall back," Mary ordered, activating her helmet cam to record everything. "Our weapons are useless." The creature touched the outer wall of the base. Metal, glass, and composite materials simply vanished on contact, as if being erased from existence. Mary and her team barely made it to the last shuttle. As they pulled away from the moon, Mary watched in horror as the base, humanity's pride, built over decades, disappeared piece by piece into the maw of the entity. "The Void Eaters," she whispered, remembering the briefings about the alien warning. "They're here." Across the galaxy, other intelligent species observed Earth's plight through their long-range monitoring systems. The Galactic Council, a loose alliance of spacefaring civilizations, held an emergency session. "The humans have encountered the Devourers," announced Elder Zorix of the Tarn Collective. "As we predicted, they will soon join the list of extinct species." "How long do they have?" asked a representative from the Vega system. "Based on previous encounters, their major population centers will be consumed within 1 Earth year," replied the Elder. "Their weapons are primitive. They have no defense." "Should we offer assistance?" suggested a younger member. The chamber filled with the equivalent of laughter from a dozen different species. "We learned long ago to avoid the Devourers," Elder Zorix said. "We observe, we record, we remember. We do not interfere." Back on Earth, the emergency meeting of the United Earth Defense Council was in chaos. Admiral Frank Porter slammed his fist on the table for order. "The moon base is gone," he announced. "And we've detected 3 more anomalies forming near Mars Colony." Captain John Miller stood. "The alien device. The one Lieutenant Carter received. We need to study it now." The room fell silent as Susan Carter placed the strange device on the table. It pulsed with an inner light, almost as if it were alive. "The dying alien said this could help us," Susan said quietly. "It said our biology might be the key." Dr. Wright nodded. "Then we better figure out how it works. Fast." Outside the meeting room window, the night sky seemed darker than usual, as if the stars themselves were holding their breath. The underground lab buzzed with activity as Dr. Wright and Lieutenant Carter worked on the alien device. For 2 weeks, they had run every test they could think of. Scanners showed it was made of materials not found on Earth. It seemed to react to human proximity, glowing brighter when someone touched it. I think it's some kind of neural interface, Dr. Wright said, examining the latest brain scan results. Look at these patterns. When you hold it, Susan, your brain activity changes. Susan frowned at the screens. But what does it do? How is it supposed to help us against the Void Eaters? The news from Mars wasn't good. 2 colonies had already been consumed. The creatures were growing larger with each feeding. Earth had maybe 2 months before they arrived. Admiral Porter entered the lab with a grim expression. Please tell me you have something. Dr. Wright pointed to his findings. The device wasn't meant for the aliens who made it. Their neural patterns wouldn't have been compatible. But human brains. He paused. Something about our brainwaves can activate it. So what happens when it's activated? The Admiral asked. We don't know yet, Susan admitted. We need a volunteer to test it fully. The room fell silent. Testing unknown alien technology was dangerous, but with Void Eaters approaching Earth, they were running out of options. Steve Morgan, a young scientist on Dr. Wright's team, stepped forward. I'll do it. Despite protests, Steve insisted. The following day, they prepared for the test. Steve sat in a specially designed chair, sensors attached to his body. Susan placed the device in his hands. Remember, at the first sign of trouble, we pull the plug, Dr. Wright reminded everyone. Steve nodded and closed his eyes. The device began to glow brighter than ever before. It seemed to melt into his hands, forming a metallic web that crawled up his arms. It's like I can see through the voids, Steve whispered. I can feel them. The creatures. They're not what we think they are. Steve's heart rate spiked. Blood began to trickle from his nose. Shut it down, Susan shouted. Before they could react, Steve convulsed violently. The device sent pulses of energy through his body. When medical staff reached him, he was already gone. The lab was shut down for 3 days while they reviewed what happened. The data showed something remarkable. For a brief moment, the nearest Void Eater had changed course, as if disrupted by the device's activation. At the emergency council meeting, opinions were divided. We lost a man, Admiral Porter said, and we still don't know how this device works. But it did something, Dr. Wright insisted. The Void Eater near Jupiter's moon Europa briefly changed direction when Steve connected with the device. For just a moment, he affected it somehow. Captain Miller studied the data, so the device creates some kind of mental link with these creatures. Could we use that to control them? Possibly, Susan said. But the human mind wasn't designed to connect with whatever these things are. The strain killed Steve instantly. We need to find a way to protect the user, Dr. Wright added, to buffer the connection somehow. News arrived that the Void Eaters had consumed the last Mars outpost. Earth was next. Admiral Porter stood up. You have 1 week to modify the device. If there's even a chance we can turn these monsters away from Earth, we have to try. As they left the meeting, Susan caught up with Captain Miller. John, I've been studying Steve's last words. He said the creatures aren't what we think they are. What if we're missing something important? John looked at her thoughtfully. Then we better figure it out fast. Across the galaxy, the alien civilizations continued to watch. What they saw confused them. Instead of fleeing or surrendering, the humans were attempting something no species had ever tried before, to understand the Void Eaters. Dr. Wright hadn't left the lab in 4 days. Coffee cups and food wrappers piled around him as he studied the data from Steve's failed connection with the device. Susan brought him a fresh sandwich, which he barely noticed. I think I understand them better now, he said without looking up. The Void Eaters? Susan asked, clearing space to sit down. He nodded. They're not evil or malevolent. They're more like animals. They feed on energy. Advanced civilizations give off a lot of energy. So they're drawn to us like moths to a flame, Susan said. Exactly. Dr. Wright pulled up images from distant telescopes. I've been studying reports from other star systems. Over the past century, dozens of civilizations have either gone dark or moved their entire populations. They're running from these things. Dr. Olivia Rodriguez, a neurologist who joined the team, entered with her own stack of data. "I might have found something important," she said. "I compared Steve's brain patterns during the connection with standard human baseline patterns." She displayed 2 scans side by side. "Human consciousness has unique properties. We operate on multiple frequencies simultaneously. Most species the aliens encountered likely had simpler conscious patterns." Dr. Wright's eyes widened. So the device was designed to amplify these consciousness patterns, to allow mental control over the Void Eaters, Olivia finished. But the connection was too strong, too direct. It overwhelmed Steve's mind. Susan picked up the device, which had been quiet since Steve's death. "We need a buffer, something to protect the human user while still allowing the connection." Captain Miller arrived with news from the Defense Council. "They've approved the modified device project. We have all the resources we need." Outside, the sky grew darker each day. The first Void Eaters had reached the outer edges of Earth's atmosphere. Military forces worldwide prepared for battle, though everyone knew conventional weapons would be useless. For the next 3 days, the team worked without rest. They modified the alien technology with human components, creating a neural interface that would protect the user's mind while allowing controlled connection with the Void Eaters. "The buffer should prevent brain damage," Olivia explained to the council. "But we still don't know if a human mind can control these creatures." "Time to find out," Admiral Porter said grimly. "The first major Void Eater will be over North America in 6 hours." The plan was simple yet terrifying. They would capture a smaller Void Eater in a specially designed energy field. Then a volunteer would attempt to connect with and control it using the modified device. "I'll do it," Captain Miller said when they asked for volunteers. Susan tried to talk him out of it. "John, we've seen what happened to Steve. Even with the buffer, this could kill you." He smiled slightly. "If we do nothing, we all die anyway." In orbit around Earth, alien observation vessels increased in number. Word had spread through the galaxy. The humans were attempting something unprecedented. No species had ever tried to fight back against the Void Eaters. Most intelligent races simply accepted extinction or fled. The humans continue to surprise. Elder Zorix noted to the Galactic Council. But their efforts will fail. The Devourers cannot be reasoned with or controlled. "Then why are you all still watching?" asked a younger member. The elder had no answer. In the containment facility, John sat in the connection chair. The modified device rested in his hands, now enclosed in a complex web of human technology. "Neural buffer online," Olivia announced. "Vital signs stable." Through the reinforced window, they could see the captured Void Eater, smaller than those attacking planets, but still terrifying in its otherworldly movement. "Are you ready?" Susan asked John over the comm. He took a deep breath. "As ready as I'll ever be." Beginning neural interface in 3, 2, 1. The device activated, glowing with blue-white light. John's body went rigid, his eyes rolling back. And somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, the universe held its breath. Pain. That was John's first sensation. Not physical pain, but something deeper, as if his mind itself was being stretched in ways it was never meant to bend. Then came the awareness. He was still in the containment room, but he could also sense the Void Eater. Its consciousness was alien, vast, and hungry. At first, it didn't notice him. Then suddenly, it did. John felt its surprise, followed by something like curiosity. It probed at his mind, trying to understand what he was. Outside, the teen watched nervously as John sat motionless, the device glowing in his hands. His vital signs fluctuated wildly. "What's happening?" Admiral Porter demanded. Dr. Wright shook his head. "We don't know. The neural link is active, but..." Susan pointed at the Void Eater. The creature had stopped moving. It hovered in place, pulsing slightly. Inside the connection, John fought to maintain his sense of self. The Void Eater's mind was overwhelming, a storm of hunger and ancient knowledge. "I am John Miller," he thought firmly. "Human, captain of the U.S. Defiant." The creature seemed confused by this assertion of identity. In all its long existence, nothing had ever spoken back to it. Prey did not communicate. Prey was simply energy to be consumed. John sensed an opening. He pushed a simple command. "Stop." The Void Eater paused. Then came a response, not in words, but in sensations and images. Hunger, need, survival. There are other ways to survive, John thought. Ways that don't require destruction. The struggle continued for hours. John would push a command. The creature would resist, then slowly yield. By the 6th hour, he could make the Void Eater move in simple patterns. "He's doing it," Susan whispered in awe. "He's actually controlling it." Across the galaxy, the alien observers could not believe what they were seeing. Elder Zorix called an emergency session of the Galactic Council. "Impossible," he declared as they watched the human tame a devourer. "In all our history, no species has managed this." "What does this mean?" asked another council member. "It means," said the elder gravely, "that we may soon have more to fear from humans than from the devourers themselves." By the 12th hour, John was exhausted but triumphant. He could now direct the Void Eater with little resistance. More importantly, he had learned from it. When the team finally disconnected him from the device, he slumped in the chair. His nose was bleeding, and he looked 10 years older. But he was smiling. "They're not just monsters," he said weakly. "They're ancient, so ancient. And they know things, incredible things." Dr. Rodriguez checked his vital signs. "Your body has undergone enormous stress, Captain. You need rest." But John grabbed her hand. "No time. The big one is coming. We need more tamers." In the days that followed, volunteers came forward. Dr. Rodriguez identified those whose brains were most compatible with the device. They built more neural interfaces and began training sessions. John recovered slowly but insisted on helping train the others. "The key is to assert your identity," he told them. "Never let them overwhelm you. Find the balance between control and communication." Some trainees failed, their minds buckling under the strain. But many succeeded. Each success revealed more about the Void Eaters. "They weren't always like this," John explained to Susan as they watched a training session. "Something happened to them, long ago. They were transformed." "Transformed from what?" she asked. Before he could answer, alarms blared throughout the facility. Admiral Porter rushed in. "The main Void Eater fleet has entered Earth orbit," he announced. "Hundreds of them. It's time to see if our tamers can really make a difference." Susan looked through the window at the dozen trained tamers, each holding their devices. "It's not enough," she whispered. "It has to be," John replied. "It's all we've got." The U.S. Defiant led a fleet of 12 ships into orbit. Each carried a trained tamer and specialized equipment built around the alien device. John sat in the command chair, looking pale but determined. "All ships report ready, Captain," Susan said from her station. John nodded. "Launch the defense network." On screens across the planet, people watched as humanity made its stand. The Void Eaters moved toward Earth like a dark cloud, consuming satellites and space stations in their path. "Neural interfaces online," reported Dr. Rodriguez from the science deck. "Tamers ready to connect." John closed his eyes. "Begin connection sequence." The modified devices activated simultaneously across the fleet. Each tamer felt the now familiar pain as their minds stretched across the void to touch the creatures. John reached out to the largest Void Eater he could sense. This one was different, older, more powerful. It noticed his presence immediately and recoiled. "They're resisting," called one of the tamers over the comm. "Push harder," John ordered. "Assert your identity. Make them see you." On Earth, Dr. Wright and Admiral Porter watched the battle unfold from mission control. The Void Eaters seemed confused, some halting their advance while others continued. "It's working," Dr. Wright said, pointing to the screens. "Some of them are changing course." A cheer went up, but was quickly silenced when 3 Void Eaters broke through. They descended toward a major city. The tamer assigned to them had collapsed, blood streaming from his ears. "We've lost Adams," Susan reported grimly. His neural load was too high. John gritted his teeth, redirect the nearest tamers to cover his sector. But everyone was already stretched thin. More Void Eaters slipped through the defensive net. Reports of ground impacts came in from across the globe. Then something unexpected happened. Lieutenant Susan Carter, who wasn't supposed to be connected to a device, grabbed a spare neural interface. "Susan." "No," Dr. Rodriguez shouted. "You haven't completed the training." Susan ignored her. "We need every tamer we can get." The device activated in her hands. Pain shot through her mind, but she pushed past it. Unlike the others, Susan found she could sense multiple Void Eaters simultaneously. She reached out to them, establishing connections with 2, then 3, then 5. "Lieutenant Carter is exhibiting unusual neural patterns," Dr. Rodriguez reported, watching the readings in amazement. "She's controlling multiple entities at once." Susan directed her linked Void Eaters to intercept those heading for Earth. For the first time, the creatures fought each other, colliding in bursts of strange energy. Across the galaxy, the alien coalition watched in stunned silence. "They're winning," whispered a junior member of the Galactic Council. Elder Zorix shook his head. "No, they're doing something far more dangerous. They're controlling the uncontrollable." As the battle raged, Susan's connection deepened. While John and the other tamers established control, Susan began to understand. Images and sensations flooded her mind, memories that weren't hers. "I can hear them," she gasped over the comm. "They're talking to me." "What are they saying?" John asked, struggling with his own connections. "They weren't always monsters," Susan said. "They were normal beings once. Like us." Something happened. An explosion, a tear in reality. It transformed them. "Why are they attacking civilizations?" Admiral Porter asked. "They're not attacking," Susan replied, her voice distant. "They're searching. Each civilization, each planet they consume, they're looking for something in the energy patterns." "Looking for what?" John asked. Susan's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "A cure. They're looking for a way to change back." The largest Void Eater, the one John struggled to control, suddenly broke free. It surged toward the Defiant. "Brace for impact," John shouted. But instead of attacking, the creature held position before the ship. It seemed to be waiting. "It wants to communicate," Susan said quietly. "With me." Time seemed to stop as the massive Void Eater hovered before the U.S. Defiant. Its dark, shifting form blocked out the stars behind it. "Don't break the connection," John warned Susan. "Stay focused." Susan nodded, her hands gripping the neural device so tightly her knuckles turned white. Sweat ran down her face as she maintained the mental link. The creature's mind was vast and complex, filled with memories older than human civilization. "They were called the Luminary," she said softly. "They were explorers, scientists. They discovered something at the edge of the universe, a rip between dimensions." Images flooded her mind, beams of light and energy, curious and intelligent, approaching a strange tear in space. Then pain, transformation, hunger. "The accident changed them," Susan continued, "trapped them between states of matter and energy. They've been consuming worlds for millennia, looking for the right energy pattern to reverse the process." Dr. Rodriguez worked frantically at her station, analyzing the data from Susan's neural connection. "There's something unique happening in Lieutenant Carter's brain patterns," she reported. "The connection is going both ways. The creature is accessing her DNA coding somehow." Admiral Porter frowned. Is that dangerous? I don't think so, Dr. Rodriguez replied. It seems more interested than threatening. On the bridge, Susan suddenly sat up straighter. Our DNA, she whispered. Human DNA contains elements similar to the luminary's original form. That's why we can connect with them when other species couldn't. The revelation stunned everyone. Dr. Wright pulled up human genetic code on his screen, comparing it to the strange patterns they detected from the Void Eaters. She's right, he said. There are similarities in the base structure. Not enough to suggest common ancestry, but enough to allow compatibility. John looked at Susan, understanding dawning. That's why the alien gave us the device. They knew we might be able to help. The largest Void Eater, now known to be a transformed luminary, moved closer to the ship. Through their mental link, Susan felt its desperate hope. They want our help, she said. They think we can reverse what happened to them. Admiral Porter's voice came over the comm. And if we can't, they'll still consume Earth. No, Susan said firmly. I shown them we're willing to try. They'll give us time. The alien coalition, monitoring from afar, sent urgent messages between their ships. The humans are communicating with the Devourers, Elder Zorix reported to the Galactic Council. This goes beyond taming. They claim to understand them. We should intervene, suggested one council member. If the humans actually cure the Devourers, then we would face two powerful species instead of one. Another finished. Elder Zorix raised his hand for silence. We will continue to observe. For now. Back on Earth, Dr. Rodriguez and Dr. Wright worked around the clock with Susan. They studied the neural patterns created when humans connected with the Void Eaters, looking for a way to use the connection to help transform them back. It might be possible, Dr. Rodriguez explained to Admiral Porter. If enough tamers connect simultaneously with one Void Eater, they could create a stable energy pattern similar to the luminary's original form. Like a template, Dr. Wright added, showing them the way back. The plan was dangerous. It would require every trained tamer working together, focusing on the largest Void Eater. If successful, that one might help transform the others. We'll only get one chance, Susan told John as they prepared. If we fail, Earth will still be at risk. John looked at the massive creature hovering in space, waiting. We won't fail, he said. As the tamers gathered, a message arrived from the alien coalition. For the first time, they offered assistance. Too little, too late, Admiral Porter muttered. Susan disagreed. We need all the help we can get. The stage was set for humanity's greatest challenge, not to destroy the monsters, but to heal them. The day of the transformation attempt dawned with a strange quiet. Across Earth, people looked up at skies filled with dark shapes, Void Eaters holding position, waiting. In a specially built facility, 24 tamers sat in a circle. Each held their neural device. At the center stood Susan, John beside her. The pattern needs to be perfect, Dr. Rodriguez reminded them. Any fluctuation could collapse the entire process. Representatives from the alien coalition had arrived in small ships. They brought devices of their own design to help stabilize the human neural network. We have observed your species for centuries, the alien leader told Admiral Porter. Never did we imagine you would attempt something like this. That's humanity for you, the Admiral replied. Always doing the unexpected. Outside, the largest Void Eater lowered itself toward the facility. Its massive form blocked the sun, casting the building in shadow. Susan took a deep breath. Everyone ready. The tamers nodded. Even with training, what they were about to attempt was far beyond anything they had done before. Begin neural connection, Susan ordered. 24 devices activated simultaneously. 24 minds reached out toward the waiting Void Eater. Susan felt them all through her own connection, a web of human consciousness. The Void Eater sensed them and responded. Its mind touched theirs, ancient and powerful. Now, Susan called. Project the pattern. The Tamers focused, creating a unified mental image based on the genetic similarities between humans and the original luminary form. The alien devices amplified the pattern, strengthening it. The Void Eater began to change. Its dark, shifting form grew brighter. Tendrils of energy pulsed through it. The creature seemed to be fighting itself, caught between what it was and what it once had been. "It's working," whispered Dr. Wright, watching the readings. "The transformation is beginning." Then something went wrong. The pattern wavered as 3 Tamers collapsed, overwhelmed by the mental strain. The Void Eater's form destabilized, turning violent. "We're losing it," John shouted. Susan stepped forward. "Everyone, focus on me." She placed herself at the center of the neural web, becoming its anchor. The pain was beyond anything she had felt before, but she held firm. "Susan, your brain can't handle this load," Dr. Rodriguez warned. "It has to," Susan replied through gritted teeth. She reached deeper into the connection, finding the core of the Void Eater's being, the memory of what it once was. She amplified that memory, feeding it back to the creature. "Remember," she projected. "Remember who you were." Light erupted from the Void Eater, so bright that sensors overloaded, so powerful that the facility shook. For a moment, everyone feared destruction. Then the light faded. Where the Void Eater had been, something new hovered, a being of pure golden energy, beautiful and intricate. "It worked," John breathed. The transformed being, a true luminary once more, communicated directly to their minds, not in words, but in feelings of gratitude and wonder. In space, the other Void Eaters sensed the change. They gathered around the transformed one by one, using the template now established. They began to change as well. The alien coalition watched in awe as monsters became magnificent beings of light. "In all our history," Elder Zorix said, "we never considered this possibility." Days later, as Earth celebrated, the newly transformed luminary shared their knowledge. Technology beyond human understanding. History from before the stars. Wisdom gathered across eons. "What will you do now?" Susan asked the luminary leader. "Live again," came the response in her mind. "And we owe that life to humanity." The alien coalition approached Earth with proper diplomatic parties. Species that had once feared humans now sought alliance. "They're afraid of us," Admiral Porter noted during a council meeting. "No," John corrected. "They respect us. We did what they thought impossible." Dr. Rodriguez smiled. "We didn't destroy the monsters. We healed them." As the luminary prepared to explore the universe once more, they left Earth with gifts of knowledge and technology, and a promise that humanity would always have friends among the stars. The universe that had watched in horror now watched in awe as a new era began.